Good evening, good morning, good afternoon to the people, joined distinguished guests, and the people who are joining us for this webinar series from PMI UAE chapter. Welcome. And I know it would be really lovely weather in the UAE at the moment with a lot of rains around, but I hope you are safe and sound and reaching to the right place. If in that matter, if you're taking it anything from the on the way, please be careful with that. I'm seeing the people are coming and joining us. Give us a couple of more minutes so that all our people are coming and joining us on time. We are slated for 1 hour, 5 minutes, 1 hour, 10 minutes webinar here as usual. But I'm really glad to see that people are joining us on the last webinar series of 2025 in the PMI UAE chapter. And I think that's a promise still goes on. We are still going to be continuing with this endeavor and they bring the right value to all the people and audience. So far, we've been doing great in 2025 and continue to do that in 2026 as well. Of course, that will be coming with a lot of different variations, topics, and a lot of esteemed different guests, which will continue to do so. Meanwhile, my name is Anshul, and the people who don't know me, I'm your host and moderator tonight, and I'm representing the PMI UAE chapter over here. With me, of course, with my lovely team, Pratish and Joyce are supporting me. I'm ensuring that everything runs seamless while we continue with this great session. So I think that's the really so nice of them. And then more importantly, there's some important quick notes which I would like to share with all of you. I'm seeing the people are still joining. It's lovely to see the guys. You can put in the chat where you're joining from, which place, which city. That will be really great to know. And then, of course, you can make best use of the networking in the chat section as well. Of course, this chat will be continued to run throughout the session. And more importantly, this session will run somewhere around, as I said, 75 minutes or something like that. We will start with a brief introduction, of course, with the chapter series. And of course, after that, we will follow the main presentation from our esteemed guest over there. After the presentation, we are going to have an interactive Q&A session as well, where we normally take all the questions from the audience, like people, great questions what posted by you people. And of course, I will collate them and then discuss with them with our particular speaker. But make sure that you post those questions not in the chat, but in the Q&A section of the session there. So that will be easy for us to slice it out from the normal chats and the particular questions which we want to be answered by our speaker there. Feel free to share your reflection in the chats. Meanwhile, your collective experience from the topic and so on and so forth. That enrich the really discussions and the quality of the people what we have bring to the table here. This session is going to bring you, as usual, the 2 PDUs to you that you're going to earn, and especially those PDUs will get normally get credit to your account of the PMI if you have used the same email address which you used in the PMI to register this webinar. With that, I think let's begin. I see the number of people coming in, 75 so far. Let's give a couple of more minutes for the people to come in. But with that, I think let me share a snapshot of the PMI UA chapter and more importantly, the volunteers who drive our community forward. That's very important for us to know and understand what's going on there. So with that, let me share my screen quickly, and then we'll help to, yeah, here you go. Let me make it a big screen. Just a second. Yeah. Perfect. So this PMI, of course, we are doing this chapter webinar as from the perspective of Project Management Institute, which of course has been founded way back in 1969 with a group of project managers, right? So those are working professionals, practitioners, industry experts, came together 50 years back, created this PMI as a kind of global community now, and then one of the largest association, which is giving you all sort of global professional certificates and accreditation, and also adding value from the perspective of knowledge sharing. It's a globally issued organization with the standards and credentials coming around with project management as a fraternity. And then also we help with the sponsor and publish research using the thought leadership and knowledge content. Coming to the particular local chapter here, UAE is one of the chapter under the MENA region. And then our vision is to really empower and influence the individuals like you with a very innovative project economy principles to turn their ideas into the quick reality. To make this vision possible, let's go with the mission statement, which goes that to disrupt and create value and the opportunities to our really chapter members like you and the partners to become more agile. Of course, one of the topics we are going to discuss today again back, innovative, productive in the platform for the growth of project economy. Chapter perspective, there's a couple of pictures around there to give you the glimpse around this. We have been doing a lot of different activities, online, offline, 100% run by volunteers. And of course, is one of the top 5 chapters in the region. We are more than 4,000 members. And then, of course, our idea is to really focus on the industry leading practices and the trends to bring it to you, and also serving as a kind of aspiring community to you, to all project professionals which are holding the PMP certifications or project certification or program or portfolio certification as well. We dependent on you to make the chapter activities as much engaging and invigorating as possible through your brilliant chats, particular discussions, and then any kind of thoughts which you bring to the table online and offline. The board is led by Mr. Adil Sultan and then rest of the board of directors helping him out throughout the different sections. We have certain benefits associated with the membership of the chapter now, and of course those membership goes with the networking, knowledge sharing, career growth, and events. So we are doing this webinar as a part of events part, and we do this webinar every month 2 times at least, in order to keep ourselves progressive and then in the loop throughout. We also introduce member corners and spotlight kind of endeavors, where we really try to help the members to share their thoughts, experiences, and their achievements with rest of the community. And then, of course, we publish them through the chapter newsletter. Please engage with the particular team of the content creation at the newsletter at pmiua.org to really share your thoughts, your achievements, and your experiences. If you want to more about the chapter activities, definitely we have the website and then the rest of the social media handles. Please follow us on the YouTube if you want to like that, and then of course in the LinkedIn and rest of the Facebook as well, where we publish the photographs. Even these webinars are getting recorded and then also getting published into YouTube channel. If you have any particular queries regarding a specific topic, please mail it to the different email addresses which are mentioned over there. Of course, if you have any specific topic to discuss, get in touch with any of the chapter members as well and the volunteers. We will route it to the right people around that. So having said that, with all these things going around and we are leading towards the end of the year, I think we are fortunate enough to really have our esteemed speaker with us. And before we jump to his achievements, I just like to share that basically with my overall experiences with PMI, PMOs, so far, I have observing that there's a recurring phenomena there. Okay, the phenomena which normally you must have witnessed, that organizations really are attempting to win a 21st century war of speed. That's something that I believe that every PMO, every community of PMOs or the organization, they always try to strive to win this kind of war using the 20th century map of control. Okay, so the speed is of different century and the tools are of different century. And then we see there's this particular symptoms of this. We see the siloed teams, we see the waterfall disguised used as agile. We see the persistent and painful gaps between the boardroom strategies and the real execution, what is going on the ground. And we really have seen the decade of optimizing how the team works, but still we are still neglected very fundamental structures around what governs this all. So high velocity team hitting low velocity bureaucratic walls is very common, but we always try to find out whom to blame, where it is the cracks are around. But today, our webinar topic is exactly aligning towards it. We are moving towards traditional, away from the traditional PMO approach, and we are going to discuss that shift from the command and control and connect and collaborate side of the thing. So we are going to definitely explore Agile Value Management Office, VMO, which is of course one of the global PMO main fundamental interest, as well as the strategic terms of teams, and designed to dissolve this particular silos approach, replace the rigid approval process with adaptive, and possibly the audit-based governance if possible. I think that's really help us out, and it isn't a process change, I would say. It's a leadership mandate basically. So let's dive into how we are really going to bridge this gap between strategy and value now, as we are going to look the challenges with the modern business which we are all living in. Fortunately, unfortunately, the project overload, the rigid bureaucracy, and the agility gap. I think we all incredibly are fortunate to be joined by our esteemed speaker and the pioneer in this field, And our guest today, he's the founder and CEO of Litspeed, a man who doesn't just consult for the Fortune 500 companies, but also help them to fundamentally rewrite their operating models. And he is a prolific author of the three seminal works, including the definitive guide for today's topic, PMO to VMO as well. Beyond the books, he has been foundational architect for Agile movement, founding member of PMI Agile Community of Practice, and advising high-stake leadership teams from US Air Force to nationwide banks around there. So I think with that, here is Mr. Sanjiv Augustine. And sir, please join us. Welcome to PMI UAE chapter. And we are really fortunate enough to have you with this last webinar of 2025 with you, and looking forward to see what kind of really tools, techniques, mindsets, and nuggets what you bring to the table, and how the audience really enjoy it with this journey. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Anshul, and thank you for the invitation to present here. Thank you also to the organizing members, Joyce and Pratish and such, and welcome everybody. Let's take this year 2025 out with a bang over here. I want to talk to you about something called the Agile Value Management Office, and Anshul set us up with a really good foundation in terms of some of the issues and challenges we're facing. Um, as I jump into my presentation, I'm also watching the participants in the webinar chat, just so that I can make sure that I'm seeing everything. Could everybody take a minute or so, a few seconds actually, to put your number one question for today, based on based on the description that Anshul has given us, based on anything that you might have seen before showing up. Put your number one question, and as you're putting the question in the chat, we will start off the presentation, and I will try and answer those things as we go along. All right. So give me a minute or so to get situated over here with the PowerPoint slides, and I'll do a quick tech check to make sure that you can see the slides and you can hear them. So Anshul, could you please give me a visual thumbs up if you can see the slides?
Yeah, I can see the slide, sir.
Okay, fantastic. All right. So our topic today is the Agile Value Management Office. Now, many of you would have heard of the Project Management Office or the Program Management Office, otherwise known as the PMO. And so we're going to be talking about some of the things that this newer label or newer group will do that we may or may not be doing with the PMO. And we're going to start more from the fundamentals of the work that needs to be done and then back into the work of this particular group, the Agile Value Management Office or VMO. All right, so Anshul gave me a great introduction. I don't want to spend too much time other than to let you know that everything that we'll be discussing today is really well aligned with the global PMI organization. In fact, I am going to have the distinct pleasure of having Lenka Pinchot. She's the chief of staff to the CEO of the PMI, Pierre Lamont, and she's going to be on my podcast sometime in January, and we're going to be talking about the direction of the PMI in general globally, including a couple major things that we'll be discussing today. One is the Manifesto for Enterprise Agility, and then the other is PMI XAI, which is their initiative, the PMI's initiative towards moving towards artificial intelligence. All right, so our agenda for today, we'll talk about why we need the Agile Value Management Office or VMO. We'll talk about what it is. So, what is an Agile Value Management Office? And then I'll get into some specifics of how we might implement an Agile Value Management Office. I have a slide on next steps, and we'll take some Q&A, as I mentioned, questions and answers as we go along. And I will definitely try to intersperse my answers as we go along, but certainly we should have some time towards the end, as Anshul mentioned. All right. So in the chat, please put a yes if you are currently on a PMO and or if you have challenges with portfolio management or management. So this is not just project management, right? So we might have a project and we have management techniques on that project. And we're talking about not just project management, but we're talking about the management above the level of the projects. When we have multiple projects or we want to pull those projects together and we want them to align and we want to realize value, we have to be able to manage that value at a level above the projects, right? So it seems like some of you are there and you're dealing with some challenges. We'll certainly get into some specific challenges, but I wanted to make sure that, what we're talking about here impacts perhaps many of you at a personal level. And then I also want to kick off now with a, a really foundational video. This video is by the change management guru, John Kotter. He's been around for a number of years. He's with Harvard Business School and talks regularly at the Harvard Business Review and such. And in this video, he talks about the evolution of our organizations and why we start to encounter problems that we might be facing at a level above the teams, particularly. All right. So here's John Cotter, and here's the video. I'm going to start the video, then I'll stop just to validate that everybody can both see and hear the video.
Hello, I'm John Cotter.
So Anshul, you can see and hear the video?
Not yet.
Oh, well, I stopped it. Let's try it again. Oops.
Okay.
Just 1 second.
Hello, I'm John Cotter, and I'm here to talk to you
Is that good?
Yes, can you just play it once to see the sound?
Yeah, so I just played it.
about winning in a
Yeah,
faster
you
and
can
faster
hear.
moving world. A world where more threats are coming at us from all kinds of different unpredictable directions, but also in which there are more windows of opportunity, opening and closing faster than ever. I am convinced that we've crossed a line in which the old methods that we've used to deal with this no longer work. And I want to talk to you briefly about what seems to work in this faster and faster moving world. To understand this, I found you need to understand how organizations naturally evolve over time and how that has gotten us to where we are now. All organizations start with a structure that kind of looks like a dynamic solar system or a molecule. Their advantage is that they can be very, very fast, very agile. They can run around existing competition. They start with a set of entrepreneurs. It doesn't matter if they're trying to make a new type of microchip or a new type of chocolate chip cookie. They attract people who work on various initiatives. It could be anything. Playing around with crazy ideas, talking to customers, doing things with alloys. And they can drop those initiatives and start new ones. If they're successful, though, they have to be able to make and ship a product or deliver a service. And as soon as that happens, you start to see growing something that we would recognize. It looks more like a hierarchy. It has jobs, it has processes, and if they continue to be successful, of course, it's that part that has to grow. And it grows, and for a brief time, you've got both systems that tend to be hooked together well because of the entrepreneurs who play a part in both. And sometimes the old-timers that have jobs over at one side and they're still in that entrepreneurial system. But as successful as they are, you know what part grows, and it grows. And at a certain point, it doesn't like the old entrepreneurial, unpredictable, whipping around system, and so it systematically eliminates it. And you end up with what we all know, a typical modern organization. Now, in a slow enough moving world, that can work fine, and it does. But as the world starts to speed up, it doesn't. And so what smart people do is they augment it. They add strategic planning committees. They hire strategic consultants. They put together interdepartmental task forces or project management organizations to first create and then to execute strategies. And if this is done well, it works up to a point. But as the world speeds up more and more, it doesn't. so they continue along this same path. It happens naturally. You add another committee, you add work streams, you add more strategy pieces, and after a while, all of this addition actually slows you down, and the whole thing starts to sink into the muck, which obviously does not win today. It raises the question of what could win today, and actually, you just saw it a minute ago. Now, let's rewind the tape. Okay, start there and go back. Go back some more. Now stop. There it is. Something that can be reliable and efficient now and can be fast and agile in helping you maneuver through this faster moving environment. It creates more wealth, better products and services, a terrific place to work, and perhaps most importantly, profitable growth.
Okay, something that is reliable and efficient and something that is fast and agile. So it's not one of those things. We need both of those things to come together and provide us both with a foundation on which to build, but also a means to adapt and change direction, even as our business needs change, or our project needs change, or our program or portfolio needs change. So, what we're going to be talking about how an Agile Value Management Office can address these organizational needs and our program and project and portfolio needs through value acceleration, strategic alignment and execution, LPM, as it's sometimes abbreviated, lean portfolio management. We'll talk about adaptive governance, risk management, and we'll also talk about scaling agile practices. And what we wanted to make sure that we outline at the outset is that the Agile VMO, the Value Management Office, is the strategic enabler. So if we have an enterprise direction, if we have a strategy in place, then the VMO can be an enabler of that strategy to get us towards the outcomes. We want some business outcomes, we want some customer outcomes, and our strategy will lay that out. Well, how do you bring that connection about? That's what we will talk about is the VMO as the connecting factor or the bridge, if you will, from strategy to outcomes. Some underpinning some of the fundamental concepts are lean portfolio management, adaptive governance, and responsible AI. I want to draw your attention to the asterisks over there because, as I mentioned earlier, these are initiatives of the global PMI direction, if you will, and they have PMI X AI and Enterprise Agility Manifesto. So I would encourage you to learn more about those things and get involved with both of those things as you take your careers forward. So let's jump into what is an Agile VMO. We've seen the rationale for it, the value proposition, what are some of the problems we're trying to solve and such. So let's talk about what it is. I want to stop here for a minute and give you a statistic. This is also from the Harvard Business Review, where it says that 90% of successful transformations that succeed, are led by middle management. So this tells us that we might have the greatest teams that deliver great value individually. We might have a visionary leader and excellent executive management, but the transformations that are successful are led by middle management. So the middle management are the glue, if you will, that drive us towards success. And one of the best ways to incorporate the middle management to an organizational construct is through the Agile Value Management Office. So what is the Agile VMO? It's a cross-functional team of teams. We'll look at what that phrase means, team of teams, in a second. But what does that cross-functional team of teams do? It helps organizations manage the flow of work from end to end. We have work that generates, sort of originates, if you will, with our customers. We get customer demand, and we have to figure out how to deliver on that demand and work through our organization silos and move the work from end to end. And so a cross-functional team of teams that helps our organization manage the work from end to end is of critical importance. It's a construct, an organizational contract that facilitates those three things that we mentioned, right? So let's look at these terms. What does cross-functional mean? Cross-functional means that we have all groups, sales, marketing, business, IT, operations, production, all working as one team or one team of teams, if you will. That's what we mean when we say cross-functional. Cross-silo simply means that when we have silos, organizational silos, then what we want to do is we want to be able to work easily and seamlessly across those silos because every time we throw something over the wall, if you will, or throw something over to a different group, we lose time, we lose momentum, and then therefore we lose value. So we want to make sure that we can incorporate a cross-silo functioning very seamlessly into our Agile Value Management Office. And then last but not the least is that our VMO helps us to work cross hierarchy. Most organizations, unless you're very small, will have several levels of organizational tiers, if you will. And that's what we would call a hierarchy. And sometimes we call that a chain of command if you're in a more traditional organization. And we know that there is a delay every time you have to go up the hierarchy and down the hierarchy in terms of decision making. So a VMO will help us work cross hierarchy and accelerate the speed of that decision making and help us or drive us towards the right decisions, if you will. So when we're setting up our Agile Value Management Office or VMO, what we want to do is if you look at this middle tier here, where we will have a couple of executives, and you see the link between an executive action team, a couple people from that executive action team. We call these folks linking pins. These are executives that help us drive the strategy, that will help us make those decisions and shorten that decision making process and accelerate our decision making velocity, if you will. Then also on the Agile VMO, we'll have managers, right? So these are senior managers. They could be program portfolio managers, senior project managers, team leads. These are the people who are driving that cross team, cross silo coordination, if you will. But here's something that you might not see that very often, and that is these blue icons, if you will, or navy blue. They're meant to indicate that we have people from our teams. So we have people from the teams, we have middle management, and we have executives all working together in that cross hierarchy, cross functional, cross hierarchy group. And you see on the left-hand side the types of work that we're doing, the strategy and vision, discovery and planning, dual track execution. I don't necessarily want to get into the details of each one of those, but the goal for all of these people working in this manner and delivering on those aspects is to create that seamless end-to-end flow of value to get us to customer value and organizational value as quickly as possible. Um, Anshul mentioned the traditional legacy type of organizations. What we want to do is to quickly move towards a cross-functional way of working. This is, of course, a transitional type of state. We'll have our executives, we'll have the Agile VMO, and then we'll have the teams. Ultimately, we want to move towards what we call a network organization. And the reason we want to do that is because we know from the latest and the greatest in organizational management that a decentralized organization is the most responsive and helps us to move most quickly in an environment that is very turbulent, if you will. So we will, eventually get there, but of course, this might take a few years as you implement your Agile VMO. So then this brings us to the question is how do we implement an Agile VMO within our organization? So I want to lay out some of the typical value management challenges. Right? We've talked about the VMO, we call it a value management office. So whether you call it a value management office or not, these are the things that we want to address. We want to make sure that we can align strategically with the direction of our organizational strategy. That is, all our projects, all our programs, all our products should be aligned, selected, and ranked based on their contribution to strategy and the desired business outcomes. Resource allocation, capacity management, dependency management, these are all PMO functions. Generally, we want to make sure that we do these efficiently and well. We want to allocate people, money, and resources where they're needed, when they're needed. And so appropriately in line with strategy. And then risk management and change management, we want to make sure that we want to make sure that we are addressing these as we go along, and we want to address them proactively both at levels at both the project and portfolio levels. So these are sort of general challenges. I want to hear from those of you who are here today. What are some of the portfolio management challenges that you might be facing yourselves? So please go, if you will, to the menti.com and enter that code at that website. Alternatively, you should be able to just get there using the QR code. So let's do this live. I want to hear from you. What are your some of the challenges that you're facing? And those should show up dynamically over here. So we're going to take a minute or so, and that'll give me a second to take a look at your questions. All right. Looks like schedule set slippages, dependency management, too many projects in flight, team members allocated to more than two projects. All right. All right. Fantastic. We're getting good participation here. Looks like 20 people have started answering and 10 have finished answering. We'll give it a minute or so to make sure that we get a good sample over here. All right, so it looks like that last question, where you have team members allocated to more than two projects, that's a big one, right? So it's a big impediment. Why is it a big impediment? It's because when we are working, let's say I'm an individual working on multiple projects, as I move from project to project to deliver, I lose my focus and I lose my time and my energy in multitasking. We know from lean production, the Toyota production system and such, that making sure that I can focus on single piece flow, working on one thing at a time, getting it done, that's the way to bring both flow, make sure that we're flowing the value, but also we know from psychology that that's the type of thing that brings each one of us individual happiness. If I can start something, get it done, and deliver value to my team, deliver value to my organization, that creates a kind of psychological flow and creates conditions for happiness. Many of us spend a lot of time at work, and we want our work to count for something. So we want to make sure that when we do something at work, we can get it done and therefore deliver value, and therefore we feel fulfilled, right? So there are things here, there are considerations here that go beyond just the way of working. It gets into the way we are functioning within our organizations and how we feel fulfilled as individuals. All right. So 5 steps to implement our Agile VMO. I'll talk about defining a fit for purpose process, organizing around value streams, planning adaptively, establishing lean portfolio management, and then incorporating flexible funding and adaptive governance. All right. So in the chat, please tell me, or please put your answer over here. When we say fit for purpose, what do you think that means? What does fit for purpose mean? Anyone want to guess? Quality, sure. Fit for purpose. That's the outcome of the fit for purpose process. But what do we mean when we use this phrase? Fit for purpose. Suitable for a particular requirement. Yes, thank you. That is Fayez Abubakar. Well said, Fayez. We want to make sure that when we design a process, the process is suitable for our environment, for our requirements, whether that's our organization or a project or a program. Anshul puts it out there in a single word, contextualize, right? It's contextualized. That is, it is contextualized or adapted or fit for purpose for our particular organization and project context, right? And a lot of other folks like Abhishek and Joe are also getting to the meaning of that term. So when we're designing a fit for purpose process, whether it's an agile process or a hybrid process or any process, we want to make sure that we can do these things, that is, focus on value delivery early and often, measure business outcomes, not outputs, right? So we want to make sure that we're getting to customer satisfaction, revenue growth, employee satisfaction, cost savings. These are all business outcomes, not just delivering a project, not just filling out a project plan, not just creating a burn down chart or a milestone chart. Those are all project outputs. What we want to do is to measure our business outcomes and therefore move to outcome driven governance. That is, we can govern, track, and monitor the delivery of those outcomes. One thing we have to be careful about is not to become too rigid in our approach. So we want to make sure that we build in some flexibility for experimentation. Can we try something, run it as an experiment, and then maybe it succeeds, maybe it fails. And in some organizations, failure is not an option, and that's not a good thing because if you don't allow our folks to fail, then they won't experiment. If you don't experiment, we won't innovate. If you don't innovate, we become rigid and hidebound, and we ultimately end up not being able to adapt as quickly as our competitors. As we do things, as we do these things, we need to make sure we can balance the cost with the value of everything. And we say artifacts over here, which are the deliverables in our project, but let's balance cost and benefit or cost and value. Right? Now, here's where I want to get into a simple illustration of a process. This, of course, builds on a popular agile process called Scrum. You can see the flexible flow here. These indications of here, you can see S1, S2. These are what's known as sprints or time boxes. Typically, what we'll do is we'll break out our project lifecycle into short sprints, short 2 week time boxes, and we'll deliver value and we'll iterate. We'll repeat the process over and over again within those time boxes or sprints, or sometimes people will call them iterations. Now, what we want to do at a level above the team is to make sure that we're constantly discovering our product requirements, discovering our project requirements, refining them, and delivering them. So we might have a sprint cycle, but how are we flowing the work into that sprint cycle into the teams? You see two teams here, end-to-end team one and end-to-end team two. So the point of this diagram, we call this business agility sparks. You can go to businessagilityspark.com and see more details, is to lay these things out at a higher level. So at the higher level, if I start on the top left, I have something called a customer innovation wall. And the customer innovation wall is capturing all my customer requirements, including emergent one, including requests, and we'll iterate through those. We'll validate those. If they're valid requests, then we move them into something that we call a portfolio Kanban. If you're used to a project book of work or a typical requirements document, think of this as the evolution of that. What they're saying is that we take those requirements, we take those ideas, we take all of the things that we need to deliver, and we're going to prioritize them, and then we're going to start to stage them on a 90, 60, and 30 days cycle and say, okay, now we have all the highest priority, highest impact work lined up for our sprint, lined up for our 2 week cycle, and that's what we'll drop into the teams, right? So the question becomes, who manages this flow of work? Who manages this demand, right? This is called demand management, and we're going to use something called lean portfolio management. And of course, what we want to do is to have our value management office or VMO to manage it. But there's one thing we need to do before we can jump into that. And that is to say, we need to structure our organization around the way the value flows through our process and through our organization. So we call that a value stream. And when from lean, which is again the Toyota production system, this is a very common term, has been around for 70, 80 years or so. What they do is they say, let's do this mapping, value stream mapping. What is the process? We're going to start with the customer request, and then let's figure out how to deliver value. And that's what we will call a value stream. And so we might end up with something that looks like this. On this slide, we have something called a customer journey. And you see the illustrated customer over there, a client, and they are applying for a loan. And there's a business process. There's a request for the loan at the beginning, and then there's a closing of the case on the right-hand side where we can get value to the customer and value for the organization. And there's that customer journey or the set of steps that the customer takes to get to value, both for themselves and for the organization. That's what we call the value stream. Now, if you look below the value stream, there are business processes, there are organizations, and we can look at our organizations, whether it's the product organization or the project organization. And what we say is, well, now let's figure out how to take all those people, all those platforms that they're working on, and align them so that we can deliver that value fast and seamlessly for our customers. So this is what we call organizing by value stream. So once we have our flexible value, our flexible process, we can then organize it by value stream, and then we can start to plan. Now, typically, if you're a project manager or a program manager, we're used to putting together long-term plans. What's important to do is to make sure that those long-term plans stay flexible and that we can progressively elaborate those as they go along. So in traditional project management, there's a term called progressive elaboration. And that's exactly what we want to do. We want to make sure that at least quarterly, at least once a quarter, we can adjust those plans in response to change at all levels of the organization. So this is not just at the project level, this is all the way up to our strategy and maybe the C-level organization, that when we put a plan out there, we will be able to adjust the plans. And to do that, what we do is that we set in place something called objectives and key results, or OKRs. And then what we do is we follow this process. We start out with our strategy. We'll do some scenario planning. Those of you who are in the energy industry or the oil and gas, you might know that this is a technique that comes all the way from Royal Dutch Shell. They came up with something called scenario planning, I want to say like 30, 40 years ago. And what we do is we consider different scenarios and we use those scenarios as our strategy. Then we put in place these metrics, if you will. Sometimes people will call them KPIs, kind of similar objectives and key results. We have an objective, and then we have key results by which we can manage those. And then we'll use those to define the outcomes. We'll prioritize the outcomes. We'll go toward those executive action team that I talked about. They will prioritize those outcomes. And then we'll move into big room planning or quarterly planning. And then we'll start to make sure that we can experiment, measure, and validate those outcomes. As we go from quarter to quarter, we'll progressively elaborate our plans, but we'll also adapt them and make sure that we can course correct and adjust as things change. All right. So the other big thing that we want to do over here, and this is our 5-step plan, if you will, for the Agile VMO. Once we have our value streams laid out, and once we start our adaptive planning cycle, then we can start to manage our portfolios, which is all the work above the project level, in a lean way. When we say lean, we mean maximum value and minimum waste. Maximum value both to the organization and to our customer, and minimum waste, as in redundancy, different types of duplication, cost overruns. We want to reduce and eliminate those. So the best way to do this is to establish some sort of a funnel. Remember, I talked about that customer innovation wall at the top. That's the beginning of our funnel. We want to make sure that our executives can give us a go, no-go decision about any sort of new initiative, whether it's a feature, or whether it's a project, whether it's an increment of a project that we call an MMP, a minimum marketable product. And then we'll hand it over to the Agile VMO to track and monitor those things. That's what we call our lean governance, if you will. And then, of course, we're tracking the delivery on our teams. So a couple of important things, and I'm going to call on our audience again. When we have work in the portfolio, there's one main principle, or at least a couple of main principles to take. The first one is to make sure that all the work, all the projects, all the requirements, all the work is visible. Right? So one of the big things is to make the work visible. And typically, when we make the work visible in our projects, whether we're using a PPM tool like Clarity or a Kanban tool like Agile Place, what we find is that we're going to find a lot of work. Those questions I asked you at the beginning, where you said there's schedule slippages, people are working between 2 and 3 projects, all those point to the fact that you have a lot of work in process or a lot of work in your portfolio. And then it starts to look like that Highway, you see this over here, you have an highway and the highway is very full, right? This is a crowded highway. What's an example from near where you live that is part of maybe your commute? Put in the chat a highway where you see traffic jams like this. I'll take a stop there for a second. Who sees a highway like this? Yeah, certainly Dubai, but what's the name of the highway? Anybody know the name of the highway that you see traffic? E11, all right? So E11 in Dubai, any other highways like this? Sheikh Zayed Highway, all right? A lot of people are saying 311. Okay, so here's my question for you. Let's say it's 311 or not D11, I guess the E311. Thank you. E311. Now, nowadays, all roads are like this. Okay. So maybe we have many examples. Right? So if I'm looking at this highway, and let's say I invested in this portfolio, if you will, of the highway, if I look at this highway, am I going to say this highway is fantastic? It's fully utilized, close to fully utilized. What do you guys think? What's the level of utilization of that highway? Pop it in the chat. How utilized is this highway? Give me a percentage. Is it 50% utilized, 75% utilized, 100% utilized? What do you guys think? 75% utilized. Yeah, because of that, maybe the one lane. Yeah. So if you take that lane out, yeah, well, there you go. Sri Kumar Pillai is taking us in the right direction. Actually, Sri Kumar, it is very highly utilized, right? We have this shared resource, the highway, and Mungarek says it is 90% utilized. Yes, absolutely. It's a very high level utilized. But the main problem is that we don't have throughput. So our traffic is struck. If I'm an individual sitting in my car or my vehicle over there, all I need to do is to get from point A to point B. And because of the level of utilization on the highway, my throughput is very low, as in I cannot get through that highway quickly and seamlessly and fast, right? And so there are some basic laws over here that affect it, and this comes to us from the theory of constraints. There's one thing called Little's law. It basically says the cycle time, the time it takes me to get from one point to the other, is a function of a numerator of the work in process, how much work I have in the process, and the throughput about how quickly I can get through. And here's an important distinction. You see on the second part of the slide, there's the size of the project or size of the vehicle, if you will, here. Small batch, medium batch, large batch. Large vehicles, large programs take a lot longer to go through our cycle than a medium or a small batch. So one of the best ways that we can speed up the work through our portfolio is to, first of all, make the work visible, cap our utilization. Don't overload our portfolio, maybe above 80%. 80% is that Little's Law magic number. And then break the larger chunks of work, larger projects and products into smaller pieces, prioritize those pieces by business value, and then deliver those business outcomes on a steady flow. So this is work that our Agile VMO can do. And then to close out the work of the VMO, it's a question of funding, right? So a lot of what we do has to be done with this mantra of let's put our money where our mouth is. That if you're talking about minimizing waste, if you're talking about accelerating project delivery, if you're talking about setting up an Agile VMO to do all of these things, we need to make sure that we have a flexible funding process and adaptive governance. That is, we need to be able to change and put money where it's needed when it's needed. Most organizations have a yearly funding cycle that began and for those of us in the USA that begins usually in October, takes about a few months, and right about now people are locking in their budgets for the entire year for 2026. Well, what happens if something changes? What happens if there's a big shift in direction? A lot of times we're locked into that plan. So what we want to do is to make sure that we can build in that flexibility. So our this VMO approach, lean portfolio approach, just as we put in the value streams, Now what we can do is we can fund those value streams and we can plan dynamically. We can still have a yearly forecast. We can fund the value streams based on the values, based on forecast, allocate the money where it's needed, and change direction as we go along. This allows us to focus on economic winners and products that are not working, projects that are not delivering. We will eliminate them on a regular basis. And this is how we extract the waste and redundancy from our process and make sure we can not only move faster, but deliver value to our organizations and our customers faster. This is a more a complex chart. We covered a lot of this in the work that we do in our training and in our consulting. But I talked about the funnel, right? So if you look left to right, we have strategic priorities. Then we want to prioritize those towards enterprise priorities. Our Agile VMO will work with our portfolio managers. We'll look at that portfolio allocation. You see here some value streams. These are the collections of projects, if you will, or products. And let's see, you have 5 value streams over there. Value stream 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's a new value stream over there that we've incorporated to stay flexible. And this is our portfolio of money. We'll manage this like a financial portfolio and make sure we can deliver value to our customers. Okay. Last word over here, this is about adaptive governance. By governance, we're basically saying that we can monitor our product projects and portfolios, we can monitor the delivery, and we can monitor our business outcomes to make sure that we're actually doing what we said we do, doing what we said we've planned out to do. And we can monitor those at multiple levels. There's the executive level. We'll do some budgeting, strategy, and OKR alignment, as we talked about. Our VMO, of course, will look at that portfolio, look at the checkpoints, the 90, 60, 30-day cycles. And then within our teams, we want to make sure that our teams can adapt and adjust. Okay, so that, I believe, keeps us on time. That got us through the slides. I am actually going to stop sharing over here. And maybe, Anshul, you can help me pick up a couple of the questions from the chat and we'll
Yeah,
ask.
sure, absolutely. I think that leave us with a couple of information which are quite deep and quite insightful. What I was going through the areas which we're looking at, why VMO, and then actually what the VMO really entails in that pyramid. Apparently, after that, what VMO looks like, how to implement the VMO, that's where you lead towards. And then apparently, finally, you jumped up to the challenges of the VMOs and how to address those challenges in the kind of a framework-based approach with the just not leaning towards the team management side of the thing, but also getting it aligned to the strategic side and the governance and the risk side also. Brilliant, Sanjeev. I think that was really quite interesting aspect of looking at the things, especially if the people are into the VMO part and they're trying to generate value. Those really are informative. Now, question-wise, I think we have a couple of questions, and as we
Yeah.
expect, and as we
And I
have
can start
discussed,
answering those. I can certainly start answering this. So I look like the first question is by Ahmed. So
yeah.
Ahmed, you have a question. What can help make the mindset shift from traditional PMO to VMO? Well, one of the things is that our business conditions are drawing us to a world where we have to deliver quickly. Our customers are becoming sophisticated, so we have to make sure that what we deliver quickly to them is of value, right? So that itself is a pull, if you will, towards the VMO. The second thing over there is that there's a global direction towards what the PMI, Pierre Lamont, who's the CEO of the PMI, would say, XMO. And whether you call it a PMO or a VMO, it doesn't matter. What we're saying is that we need to have a middle management group that will help us deliver value. And so that shift is industry wide and supported by the direction of the PMI.
Okay, we have the Hafiz question there. What steps can traditional waterfall engineering consultancy offices can take to move towards
Okay,
practice?
I'll make it very simple. And I'll make it very simple by asking you a question. Excuse me. And the question is, you might have heard this phrase. It's common here in the West. How do you eat an elephant? Has anybody heard that phrase? How do you eat an elephant? Or the question. Anyone know the answer to that question? How do you eat an elephant?
Yes, I know, but I will want to give the audience a chance.
Yeah. Audience, how do you eat an elephant? Maybe they are. So I'm not advocating eating elephants. They're very wise and wonderful creatures, but it's a phrase that they use over here, and it's basically the answer to that is one bite at a time. So if the question is how do we move from traditional to agile, the first thing we need to do is to figure out how to break our work, a large complex problem, whether it's a project or a product, into smaller pieces. And so what we advocate is to move towards those MMPs, minimum marketable products, break our work into smaller pieces, and then figure out the best way to deliver those pieces. You might be using traditional project management efforts, you might be using agile sprints, it doesn't matter. Breaking a large project into smaller pieces, phasing the delivery, or making a larger product into smaller product increments, and then phasing the delivery is the way to get started.
Great. So I think getting into the peace mindset, I would say that's the beginning around it. Okay,
One piece at
great.
a time. Yeah.
Yeah. So we have the question from Monregek. Resource allocation. Oh, that's not a question. I think that was a comment, I believe. There is a question from uh, Thiru. Flexible funding. No, that's also a comment, looks to me. That's not a question. Flexible funding is not an easy organization. They have a lot of restriction in this area.
Certainly, I sympathize, I empathize. A lot of times you have to go all the way up to the CFO level because the accounting practices have to change. Again, when your competitors are doing it, many executives realize that they can't afford not to do it, right? So once we get management on board, then we can move towards more flexible funding.
Perfect.
But we have to tell them what is good for the organization.
Yeah, I think there is one question is that also again is coming from uh, Marshed is how can we switch to agile project from predictive project in oil and gas projects with long history in predictive project management. Problem of budget management is also there.
Okay, so budget management is a little further into the future, but the first thing you can do is to chunk the work, break things down into smaller pieces. The next thing you can do is to make sure that you have a visual management system, and we call it portfolio Kanban. You can call it a program board, you can call it a portfolio board, but making sure that all the work in your portfolio is visible. If I've taken the pieces, I've broken them down, then as we flow that work from start to finish, from from conception to cash, from concept to cash, we want to be able to track that in a visual management system. Many tools exist that will do this for us, whether it's a Microsoft tool or an Agile tool like Agile Place or Clarity or any one of these tools. They will allow us to track all the work in process. So break the work down and then track and monitor it. That's a great way of just going agile from the very basics.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sanjeev. Any tips to get in active management or leadership engagement based on your experience? Dr. Sarvanan is asking.
Any tips to get active management, leadership, engagement? I think there's a new generation of management and leadership that has moved in this direction already, and that's in the not just over here in the U.S. where I am, but all definitely in the MENA area and of course in Asia, where they call it adaptive leadership, they call it modern management. And so the more we can call out those folks, and if we go to our boss or our boss's boss and say, sir or ma'am, here's something that looks interesting. I believe we can help this. We can start to change the mindset of our managers and leaders. So, for example, I know in Saudi Arabia, they have Saudi Telecom, I believe, has a lot of this VMO practices built in.
Okay. No, I think I'm not seeing any more questions as such here, Sanjeev. So I think with that, I would say that let me to conclude the session. Again, I want to thank you for every kind of question and every participant who has joined from across the globe, guys, and then who has really, and our volunteer team who has been making this webinar possible. I think a good thanks to all of you. Special recognition to our teams and membership, outreach and volunteering, and marketing colleagues who are ensuring that PMI UAE chapter insights reach to our global community. And then remember, leadership isn't about executing the task, right? It's about inspiring people, navigating complexity, and leaving a legacy with an impact. I think the true measure of the project professional, just like all of you, isn't the number of projects what you're going to deliver, but also to make a difference in the team, stakeholder, and the communities together. So thank you so much, Sanjeev, and rest of the team over here. I would like to say thank you and then final goodbye for 2025 on this webinar series, and see you in the 2026 series going ahead. Have a lovely new year with you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Happy New Year to everybody. Early Happy New Year's.
Lovely Happy New Year. Thank you. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thank you.